Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning. We need to get started. So good to see you all here this morning. Welcome to 1111 this morning, 1111 downtown. It's good to be back. I have been gone for a couple of Sundays on vacation with my wife, and it's been really wonderful. Been up in northern Michigan, and you can thank me for bringing the cool weather back down. It's really nice up there this time of year. And a special thank you, Sharm. Thanks so much. Sharm did a fantastic job. Sharm always does an amazing job, and I am just always in awe, and I got to see a little bit of one of them because the Wi-Fi was pretty poor where we were, but I really always appreciate it when Sharm preaches and speaks and takes the leadership. And then Peter, if y'all came in the front door, Peter was playing off in the corner. You might not have seen him back there, but thank you, Peter. That was really nice. So we got a couple of quick announcements. While I'm making some announcements, I hope that you will register your attendance on the card. If you want to get all fancy, you can scan the code and then fill out your attendance online and do it that way. One of these days, we'll stamp your foreheads, and all you got to do is walk in the room, and it'll be so much easier. But that'll be in the future. So make sure you fill out a card. You bring it up when we do our offering song, along with an offering, with the offerings you brought. So make sure you do that. A couple of quick announcements. I'm going to invite Bill Longsworth to come up. Bill? Right here. Bill's going to come up and share a little something about some workshops coming up dealing with Alzheimer's. So y'all give him your attention.
Is this what I use?
Yes. Yeah, just use that one.
I'm going to make an announcement about an Alzheimer's event. But first of all, I want to tell you a story. There was a lady, and she was watching TV, and while she was sitting in her chair, she thought, wow, I think I need a cup of coffee. So she starts out to the kitchen, and on the way, a friend calls on the telephone and says to her, well, why don't we try to get together for lunch next week? You know where the old Penny's was, and they have a candy store right next to it. Why don't we try to get to lunch for next week? She said, that'd be fine. And she then chuckled for a minute, and the friend asked, well, why are you chuckling? Oh, she said, I was just thinking about something. We had a wonderful trip together on that fishing expedition over the summer. And so then she goes into the kitchen, and then she says, what am I here for? Now, has that ever happened to you? It never happens to me. I'm kidding, of course. So then she goes back and sits in the chair, says, I'll go back and sort of see if I can remember why I got up. But, oh, yes, I needed a cup of coffee. So she went out to the kitchen and got the cup of coffee. That's normal. Lady was sitting in front of a television watching and said to herself, I think I want some coffee. So she heads out to the kitchen, and a telephone rings, and her friend is on the line and says, well, why weren't you here? And she said, what do you mean? Well, we were supposed to get together for lunch. Don't you remember at Penny's right near the candy store? Well, no, it would have been nice of you to give me some notice. And by the way, you better stay away from that candy store. I have a picture of you from when we were fishing together, and you were leaning over the boat, and your fat was hanging all out of your bathing suit. What do you mean I maybe need to see a doctor? You need to see a doctor about a diet. Goes on into the kitchen, and there's a cold cup of coffee on the counter. She said, they left that there when they were stealing. And she says, they've been stealing my toilet paper. So she said, I need to go to the store and get some. And so she goes to the store, and she gets a half gallon of milk plus another 6 rolls of toilet paper, and comes back, and lo and behold, there's an already unopened quart of milk in the refrigerator. And then she goes to the cabinet where she's going to put the toilet paper, and lo and behold, the cabinet's full. That's where they're hiding it. When they steal my toilet paper, they're hiding it right there. I'm putting this underneath the bed in my bedroom so they can't find that and steal it there. Now she says, why am I here? Well, she went back to her chair and said, oh, I wanted a cup of coffee. That's not normal. That's early stages of Alzheimer's. Number one, you forget. Number two, you're more likely to be irascible. And number three, you're paranoid. You think people are doing things on you and you don't know what to do. The person that taught me that was Teepa Snow. She's going to be at our church on September 7th, that's a Friday, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon with lunch in between. It used to be $10. We've moved it up to $20. If some of you want to put down $10, and Bill told me it was okay, you go ahead and do that. She is probably the most important person in the United States in terms of Alzheimer's, both in understanding what it's like, but then more important, how to help people who have it. The baby boomer generation is now reaching up into the 70s, and that means they're expecting a tsunami of people with dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And so it's going to be really important for us to know how to relate to such people with respect and dignity. What I learned from the one seminar I've been with her was that I am no longer afraid of Alzheimer's, because if there are people who know how to take care of me in a respectful and dignified way, then I can make it. Thank you for your time. Friday, September 7th. Thank you.
Bill. So just real quick, to also acknowledge a couple of others, and we'll be announcing that again as we get closer, but a couple of quick things. The First We Drum is happening again this Tuesday. Last month, we had like 18 people. We had a nice crowd. I hope you'll join us for that. It's a lot of fun. Read about it there. Commission on the Way Forward report. I encourage everyone in here to get online, check out that link, check out what's going on with the United Methodist Church worldwide, what we're struggling about with this issue over human sexuality, all the different sides of it, and the report that comes out, or that has come out now from the Council of Bishops for our general church. This commission came up with 3 recommendations, and the Bishops' Council chose 1 to recommend, and then in February 2019, the whole church, all of our delegation, will vote in St. Louis on what the future will hold. There's good discussion, there's good insights and links from that article, but this will give you the actual report and the recommendations. So I really encourage you to be in the know and check that out. Also, the back-to-school shirt drive, and then our wine and wishful thinking. So, so glad that you all are here, and it's good to be back with you. Let's begin.
Welcome candle is lit. Would you read along with me? And let's welcome each other. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again.
You say the last election didn't turn out like you planned. You're feeling blue and clueless, you just don't understand. You're sad, sulky, sullen, moping and morose. You're woeful, weak and weary, semi-comatose. You stare at your computer screen, devoid of any joy and hope. You're so depressed you can't get dressed, your noose is up a rope. Just remind yourself when you can't stand it anymore. We've been through some crappy times before. We've been through some crappy times before. Slavery, unbridled knavery, and the Civil War. Don't stop caring, stop despairing, get up off the floor. 'Cause we've been through some crappy times before. Intolerable intolerance has swept across the land. The gospel-thumping homophobes, they got the upper hand. They're peeping through the windows, they're creeping through the door. But we've been through some crappy times before. We've been through some crappy times before. McCarthyism, prohibition, and the world wars. We're up a creek, this boat is leaking, still we'll reach the shore. 'Cause we've been through some crappy times before. We hear reassurance assurances that everything is fine. It's been a while since we were a canary in this mine. When you think it's really bad, it gets a little worse. And keep on looking forward, though we're going in reverse. We shout out that the emperor's not wearing any clothes. He lies so much you could hang your laundry from his nose. The fox is in the henhouse, the wolf is at the door. We've been through some crappy times before. We've been through some crappy times before. Indiscretion, floods, depression, Vietnam, and more. The sun is set, don't forget another day is in store. 'Cause we've been through some crappy times before. We've been through some crappy times before. We've been through some crappy times.
Sorry. Before you go and start thinking, wow, what a political song to put together at this time, it was actually written in 2003. So, or 2004, I think. The crappy times come and go and come and go and keep coming and going and keep coming. So it just seemed like an interesting song, especially in our context today, as I want to think with you about what does it really mean to be grateful? You know, and when times are crappy as well as when times are good, what does it really mean to be grateful? And we're going to look at the story of Zacchaeus. But I'd like to offer a prayer, and would invite you to join with me as we have this prayer. Let's pray together. Holy One, we come this morning. The weather has cooled. The rain has come just when we thought the drought was going to continue on, just when we thought the heat couldn't get any hotter, and it starts to cool. And yet we know we play a big role in how things happen around us. We live and we move, and we have our very ground of being in your being. And we are interdependent upon one another and creation. And so while we focus on our own anxieties from time to time, we are mindful that the world also experiences deep anxieties, even when things are going, as some would suggest, better overall. So we find ourselves longing for ways to participate that make the world not just a better place, but that expand our whole idea of what it really means to be grateful. So this morning we are grateful to be together. We are grateful to have this chance to be in this space. But more than that, we are grateful to have a chance to open up and to explore the unfamiliar, the anxious, and perhaps things that are even a little frightening for us. We know that we do this together, grounded in a greater hope and possibility. For that we give thanks. Amen.
It's time for our offering song, which means I'd like to invite all of you fine people to stand and sing with us. And if you have an offering, this is a super great time to bring it to the table and drop it in our baskets right there at any point during this song. Elena's going to lead this. Let's all jump in. Get some full gospel sound.
This morning and my mind was
stayed on freedom.
I woke up this morning and my mind was
stayed on freedom.
I woke up this morning and my mind was
stayed on freedom. Hallelujah.
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 Well, let me tell you that I'm looking and talking with my mind.
Let's sing.
Stayed on freedom.
Right.
You know I'm looking and talking with my mind.
Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah.
Everybody solo. That's good. Let's sing another verse together. Here we go.
I'm teaching and preaching with my mind.
Say it.
Stayed on freedom. I'm teaching and preaching with my mind. Stayed on freedom. I'm teaching and preaching with my mind. With my mind. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Sing it.
Stayed on freedom. Stayed on freedom. Stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Lord have mercy. Would y'all take a moment and offer one another a sign of peace? Good deal.
Go back to the piano because I can't hear nothing.
It's right after the reading or the message. Yeah. I'm gonna give them a second though. They still visiting.
This is where we slide into our Kairos time, a more reflective time. No better way to get there than, I think, with a song written by our dear friend Elizabeth Wills. Elena's going to lead this one too, and I invite all you good people to sing with us.
Love, hear my voice through the silence and the noise. Peace is welcome in, welcome in.
Y'all can sing with us.
Love, fill my heart, pull me close when I'm apart. Peace is welcome in, welcome in. Love, be my guide,
as we continue this quiet time, I invite you to sit up straight, find a comfortable way to sit, make plenty of room for breathing. And as you find your rhythm, consider placing your hands together so that just your fingertips touch ever so lightly, and perhaps the heel of your hands. And as you breathe, move them up and down, like a spider doing push-ups on a mirror. Find your rhythm and just be here. Breathe in this gift of time together. This time to be still and aware of your own body. Perhaps allowing it to relax just a little more. This gift we share of breathing together is not to be taken lightly. And so we give thanks. Amen.
Too many things. Okay, I'm trying to balance earplugs and readers. Can anybody relate? The readings today are from Luke and from Thessalonians. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this, and they began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay back 4 times that amount." The second reading is from Thessalonians. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And Tom will now teach us how to pronounce Zacchaeus correctly.
I hate to see you cry, lying
That song will preach right there all by itself. I know the heart of life is good. Love should be there. It should be there to help. And it does a bit. But somehow, how do we know the heart of life is still good, right? I think that's what the story of Zacchaeus is really about, but I know that's not what we might remember about the Zacchaeus story. And it's Zacchaeus. I think you pronounced it correctly. I am going to pronounce it incorrectly for the next 15 minutes, because that's how I remember it from Vacation Bible School. And surely those of you who remember VBS, and trust me, I only went once, but I still remember this, you might remember the song, right? Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. And this sad, he climbed up in the sycamore tree, just the Lord Jesus to see. And then there's more to it, and I don't remember that, yeah. I'm looking back at a few of you who are going like, there's more. I don't remember the rest of it. But that's kind of what we remember about this story. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and he climbs up into the sycamore tree and sees his Lord and Savior come. And then we sort of think, well, that's what this story is really all about. This story is really all about this idea that God's love is extended even to, not just prostitutes and Samaritans, but the dreaded tax collectors, who are just about as evil as they come. So we have this idea that it's all about salvation. Salvation has come to this house. But I have a couple of questions with that, and a couple of problems with that. This is where I think that this story is saying much more than that. And if we read a little bit further, we realize that it says that salvation has come to this house, but I think the most obvious response to my question is, I didn't ask the question yet. But the question is, what does this have to do with gratitude? What does the Zacchaeus story, if anything, have to do with gratitude? And what I'm going to suggest before I forget is that at the very heart of life, at the very heart of our being, in spite of what happens, there is a way to experience this deep sense of gratitude. But I think we have to move through a few VBS teachings that we still carry with us. First of all, I think that when we understand a lot of times that the Bible is about shoulds and shouldn'ts, we should be grateful for God's forgiveness, and so we receive salvation because we have responded. But I don't read the Bible as a lot of people do, that it's all about shoulds and shouldn'ts, in response to a God out beyond us who is demanding this or that of us, or even offering this or that to us, if we would only do the right stuff. Secondly, Zacchaeus didn't ask for forgiveness or even affirm any kind of creed or doctrine. And third, what does it mean salvation has come to this house? Now, I know what we think it meant. We think it means that Zacchaeus was now accepted into God's love and will get to go to heaven. Maybe that's not what you all think, but that's a typical way I remember hearing it from Vacation Bible School. And I think this is where we get stuck, like we do with so much of our understanding of the Bible, as well as religion, and as well as even gratitude. We generically speaking, we keep thinking that it's about us individually, that salvation is about us individually, that gratitude even is about us individually, that it's about this or that for me, that it's about what God can do for you or for me individually, and the kingdom of God becomes more of a club than a community when we start thinking that way. Granted, I hope you'll think the way I think, because I'd love for you to be in the club. But if you don't, you're not. I mean, that's kind of where the reasoning takes us. I read books about gratitude, and I read some this past week, some more, and the prevailing concept that we always get with this idea of developing an attitude of gratitude is that to practice being thankful for what we have, but when I read what I have or what you have, and this is replete in Facebook, we see these postings, or on Pinterest, we see these lovely postings of what we're thankful for this day and how we feel so grateful for this or that. I'm left with this sense of who has and who doesn't. I'm left with this sense of longing for a peace that you seem to have that I don't. And somehow I don't think that's what gratitude is really about. And it's certainly not what this story, Zacchaeus, is about. But before I disabuse you of your desire to be thankful, because I'm not saying don't be thankful, I want to say that thankfulness is a good thing. Research shows that thankfulness is good for our brain, it's good for our emotions, to practice a little daily thankfulness, to make a little list of the things we're thankful for today. But I want to suggest that it's more gratuitous than gratitude. Does that make sense to you? No? I don't profess to know what I'm talking about. To be thankful, well, I think you'll figure it out as we get towards the end. But for me, this idea of this list of thankfulness, where does it come from? Again, it comes from what I am thankful for. It comes from what I think I've been given. It comes from what I think I am blessed with. And when we start thinking in that way, I think what we do is we start risking something. I think we start risking making God and even our own thankfulness very, very small. This story is really about having something much bigger. I want to suggest to you that this story is about a big kind of curiosity. It's about a big mind. It's about a big heart. And it always has to begin with some level of vulnerability, some level of taking a risk, which of course carries the potential of being rejected or failing or being hurt. But then let's say that we don't do this because we're afraid, or that we don't do this because we're anxious about what we don't have. And when what I do and what I think and what I'm thankful for becomes rooted in what I am afraid of or what I am satisfied by, which oftentimes is what those lists represent, do they not? What seems to make me feel good? I'm glad the sun rose today. I'm glad we got a little rain. I'm glad I've got children. It's no reason not to be thankful for all those things, but they truly still are about us. And when that is what we have, doesn't it suggest that, in fact, our faith has become small? That, in fact, our God has become small? That, in fact, our gratitude even is small? And I want to suggest to you that the story of Zacchaeus is much more about the bigness of God's being. So I'm going to jump into a story. Around 7:30 on Friday night, I found myself in search of some theological reflection, so I went to my favorite theological ground or theological discussion place. I went to Old South Pancake House. And maybe because it had started to rain, or it was just the way the chips had fallen that night, it was pretty empty. And as I walked up to the front room, it was only full in that front room. As those of you who've been there realize there's two back rooms. There's kind of a middle room and a back room. And the hostess was standing there. I walk in with my laptop and a book or two, and she looks at me, and there's two parties of 4 people waiting, and they look at me. I just walk right up to the desk there, to the counter there, and the woman looks at me and she says, "Preachers and students to the back." I'm not sure what she was thinking. Maybe she recognized me. She said, "We'll be with you in a minute." And then after a few moments, when things kind of settled down at the front, my server, Jennifer, came to me. And it was pretty empty back there with just about 5 or 6 of us scattered around in that back room. And she comes to me and she says, "What are you working on?" And I said, there's always an anxiety when somebody starts to ask me what I'm working on. Because I'm thinking, if I say, "Well, I'm reworking my sermon this evening," then the response is going to be one of a couple of things. "Oh, you're a Christian. Well, praise God." And my first inclination is to say, as my brother would say whenever he introduced us to friends that my wife and I are ministers, he'd always say, "But not that kind." And I thought, well, if I said, "Oh, I'm not a Christian like that," well, that was going to create all sorts of problems. So then I thought, well, what if she might respond with this other thing? Because there were a couple of us in there, and she might respond with this, "Oh, wow, really? Well, John over there, he's a pastor too, over at Overflowing Sinners Haven, Post-Dispensational Church of God. Y'all should get together and work on your sermons." But this is what she said, to be honest. She said, "Really? You're just now getting started on it?" She laughed, she sat down my coffee, she took my order, and then she went off to serve the other customers. But after about an hour into my writing, there was a lull in the room's traffic, and Jennifer came over to me, politely interrupted, grabbed up my food, and then she said, "So what you gonna preach about?" So I tell her, "I'm going to talk about gratitude." And she jumps into a platter full of cliches. She said, too blessed to be depressed. That's what I always say. Count your blessings, name them one by one. An attitude of gratitude leads to satisfactitude. I smile and say, I'm going to keep that one. And I said, but here's the thing. My problem is that I think it's pretty easy for me to tally up a pretty decent list of things I'm thankful for. Kids and sunshine, life, breath, rain, a decent house, friends. It kind of becomes a little bit romantic, doesn't it? I said. It's almost a little shallow. It's like those Facebook posters, pictures of puppies and flowers and stuff. And she smiled and she said, but I like those pictures. And I said, well, I get it. I get it. But sometimes I think when I think about what I'm thankful for, I think it's really kind of based on a lot of my privilege, too. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm thankful for is kind of conditional, isn't it? What I want or think I need to be happy or to feel good, I mean, that's what I typically am grateful to God for. It's what I feel like I need. And that's almost like saying if I didn't have any of that stuff, or if I was suffering from a chronic illness, then I wouldn't be able to have that much gratitude. I wouldn't have much to be grateful for, or at least it might seem like that. And she was actually sitting there listening, or standing there listening to me. I said, here's what I think it is, and I want your opinion. I actually asked for opinion. I said, I think that the problem with gratitude is that we need to think bigger. I think gratitude should be something that truly changes our lives and the world. And it has less to do with things we like and things that we have or things that make us happy. And it has more to do with things we don't like and things we don't have or that make us unhappy or even scared or that we even consider as perhaps an enemy or some evil. And I figured at that point she'd give me a blank stare, shake her head, and say, bless your heart. But she didn't. Instead, she actually said, okay, wait a minute. What are you saying? And I said, really? She said, yeah, I got a few minutes. And she said, do you mind if I sit down? And so she sat down. She smiled, and I said, all right, I'll do my best to draw an analogy. On occasion, I said, I will deliver a message that really triggers some kind of angry response. Doesn't happen very often. She said, really? I said, yeah, and this one time, when I had done a sermon, I was at a church in South Dallas, and I got a response to something I said, except I hadn't said what the person left on the phone message said that I had said. They thought that I'd been talking about some liberal agenda, supporting one candidate over another, affirming some kind of group of protesters that were out affirming their candidate. And all I had talked about was a group of improvisers who one by one had jumped on a city train. And as each one jumped on the train, they were only wearing boxer shorts and a jacket and a tie. And they sat down. One by one, they came to each stop. Another person got on, boxer shorts and a jacket. And when they got to the end of all the stops, a guy steps on and he's carrying an armload of slacks. And he says, who wants pants? And I said, the congregation kind of laughed. And I said, but then I get back to my office later that week and there's a message. And it's an angry, mean-spirited man who says I was pulling for some political agenda, some liberal agenda, and I was supporting some protesters. And so I called the man in spite of the anger, I said. Imagine that you have been stiffed. I said, imagine you have been stiffed by a tip or two, and maybe a gripey, mean-spirited customer. And someone was able to push all of your buttons. And she said that happens at least once a day. I said, well, instead of getting angry with this man and indignant, I surprised myself because at first it made me angry, and at first I got defensive, and at first I didn't want to talk to them at all. But then I started asking myself a question. Why would anybody who would normally, you would think, as any normal human being, want to experience joy, why would anyone choose to be mean-spirited? Now think about that. I said, why would anyone, like you or me, who would prefer to enjoy ourselves, prefer to be pleasant, prefer to be happy, suddenly choose to be mean-spirited, beyond just the agenda or the issue, but to be mean-spirited? It's not as if he was just arguing for his case. He was mean. Why would people do that? And she kind of looked at me and she says, I don't know, but I get a lot of them in here. And I said, well, that's what I wanted to know too. And so I got on the phone and I called him. And after we talked, he realized he hadn't heard what I said at all. And he even apologized for mishearing it and then said, my wife told me I probably misheard the whole thing. And I said, well, that's all right. It happens all the time. And then he thanked me and he got off the phone. And Jennifer looked at me and she said, but why was he so angry? And I said, I don't know. I really don't know. But it made me think of this Zacchaeus story. Because the story to me is so much more about where we find ourselves and where we're willing to get out of it and climb a tree and see something different. And that suddenly changes everything. If my gratitude or my faith or how I understand things is limited only to what feels comfortable, then don't I miss out on what's possibly there? If gratitude is much more than simply what makes me feel good, then maybe it gets a little muddy and maybe it gets a little messy. But at the heart of it, we begin discovering there was more there than we thought. Well, Jennifer listened, and then after a bit, she said, well, that's really interesting. And then she said, so what does that whole thing have to do with gratitude? And I kind of smiled, and I said, well, that's what I'm working on. And then I continued to write what I just shared with you. And she got up, and I said, but I think it has something to do with not making up our mind first. And she kind of smiled, and she said, I'll try to do that next time a person stiffs my tip. And she walked off. I was reading a book by Diana Butler Bass, and Diana Butler Bass suggests this thing. She says that sometimes gratitude seems to be pleasure-oriented. But what if gratitude is the way of life itself? What if, when we understand what Paul says, God is the very ground of our being, what if gratitude has something to do with connecting to the ground of our being before anything else? To be rooted. Sometimes we find that root with friends, right? Sometimes we find that rootedness in friends. But the thing about it is it always requires some level of vulnerability, some willingness to experience something more than our first reaction. I went and visited a friend in the hospital yesterday who had a kidney stone. And he was in excruciating pain. If you've ever had one, I understand they're just unbearably painful. And I stayed with him for a while, and it hadn't passed, but he got medication. The doctor sent him home. And later on in the evening, I called him back, and I said, so, how are you doing? Well, I'm feeling better. I'm still in pain. And I said, I just got a weird, funky question. Are you grateful for that kidney stone? Right, that's kind of what I would have thought his response would be, that, or like, what the heck? And just hang up on me, right? And he kind of laughed on the phone, and he says, I suppose there's something you can learn from every experience, something you can grow from. He said, I had a calcified growth that I got in my kidney, and I'm still trying to pass that lesson. And I got his sense of humor, I really did. But there is something about gratitude that if we're not careful, it becomes gratuitous. It becomes a kind of thing that covers up really what we're afraid of. Think about it. If gratitude is more about what we're afraid of not having, then isn't our faith small? Then isn't our perspective small? I'm going to give you this story real quick, and I'm going to invite the band to come on back up here because they're going to sing a song in just a second. One of my favorite poems that we've read in here is by Rumi, the 14th century poet, Mideastern poet. It's entitled "This Guest House." I often lean on this story. I find actual comfort in this story sometimes. This being human is a guest house. Think of Zacchaeus. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness as an unexpected visitor. Maybe Jesus, maybe something compassionate. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide beyond. Be grateful for whatever comes. See, gratitude is not liking. Gratitude is not about liking. Gratitude is about realizing that we are connected to the ground of being no matter what happens. That we share that connection with one another no matter what happens. No matter who we think is the enemy. No matter who is different. We share that very ground of being. Maybe that's what Zacchaeus realized. When salvation came to the house, it's not as though salvation wasn't already there. It's more like Zacchaeus finally saw it. And of course, you know what the word salvation means, right? It doesn't mean ticket to heaven. It means wholeness. It means a completeness. There's something about risking that vulnerability sometimes, stepping out beyond, climbing that tree, experiencing the wider world that's a little bit shaky. Maybe even asking ourselves questions about the things that we like, the things that we are so grateful for. Perhaps go to Old South Pancake House on a Friday night or a Saturday night and wait till 2 o'clock. Jennifer says it gets weird. And ask yourself, not, man, I don't like those people. Ask yourself, what are they thankful for? What are they enjoying? What are they missing? Ask yourself, why is that guy angry? Because all of us would rather be happy, right? We used to have a class in seminary called Social Context, where we would travel to strange situations. I invite you to do a little roomie practice. Go into the strange and open up a bit and begin to see what might be there. I think gratitude begins with curiosity, and next week I want to spend a little bit of time actually talking about how we practice a grateful curiosity that is so much less about the lists of things we like and much more about the things we don't understand and how much we can find there. So Jennifer came back after I'd been there for 3 hours, and she says, her shift's ending. And she's wanting to clear up the tip, and the bill and the tip and everything. But she asked me, she said this. She said, so do you want a pie to finish off your evening? And I said, yeah. And this is, my son Tim is here. He knows this has happened several times because we've gone there late at night too. And so she says, yeah, what do you want? And I smile and I say, well, what do you have? And she smiles back and says, I don't know. It's always a mystery. And I said, well, you don't know what she had? And she said, well, I can tell you what we started off with this afternoon. But I don't know what's left. And then I said, well, why don't you go and see, come back and tell me, I'll tell you what I want, then you can go back and get it. And she smiled, she said, that requires 2 or 3 trips, doesn't it? And I have 4 or 5 customers, and she smiled and she said, I got a deal for you. Why don't you tell me what you like? I'll go see what we have and bring back the closest thing to it. And I thought, that sounds amazing. And so I said, that's great. I said, okay, fine. I like apple, chocolate, banana, custard. She brought me a strawberry rhubarb. But here's the thing, I got to tell you, I used to think I hated rhubarb.
Woke up cold one Tuesday. I'm looking tired and feeling quite sick. I felt like there was something missing in my day-to-day life. So quickly opened the wardrobe, put out some jeans and a t-shirt that seemed clean. Topped it off with a pair of old shoes that were ripped around the seams. And I thought, these shoes don't suit me. Hey, I put some new shoes on. Suddenly everything is right. I said, hey, I put some new shoes on. Everybody's smiling, it's so inviting. I'm short on money, but long on time. Slowly strolling in the sweet sunshine. And I'm Running late, I don't need an excuse, 'cause I'm wearing my brand new shoe. I woke up late one Thursday, and I'm seeing stars as I'm rubbing my eyes. I felt like there were 2 days missing as I focused on the time. I made my way to the kitchen. I had to stop from the shock of what I'd found. A room full of all my friends dancing round and round. And I thought, hello, shoes, bye-bye blues. Hey, I put some new shoes on. Suddenly everything is right. Hey, I put some new shoes on. Everybody's smiling, it's so inviting. I'm short on money, but long on time. Slowly strolling in the sweet sunshine. I'm running late, I don't need an excuse. I'm wearing my brand new shoes. Send me wandering through these streets with bright lights and the angels meet. Stone to stone, they take me on. I'm walking in the break of dawn. I say, take me through these streets with bright lights and the angels meet. Stone to stone, they take me on. I'm walking through the break of dawn, and hey, I get some new shoes on. Suddenly everything is right. Hey, I put some new shoes on. Everybody's smiling, it's so inviting. I'm short on money, but long on time. Slowly strolling in the sweet sunshine. I'm running late, I don't need an excuse. I'm wearing my brand new shoes. Hey, I put some new shoes on. Suddenly everything is right. Hey, I put some new shoes on. Everybody's smiling, it's so inviting. I'm short on money, but long on time. Slowly strolling in the sweet sunshine. I'm running late, I don't need an excuse. I'm wearing my brand new shoes.
Nice. So good to have Brad back. I'm going to take just a moment. Yeah, good to have you back, Brad. So I'm walking back here, which is kind of weird because I want to recognize some folks that have joined recently, and another couple called up this morning and said they couldn't be here after all they got sick, so I'm going to have to just highlight them by themselves, which I know they didn't want to do. But we're glad to have Gene and Debbie Wisdom here, and this is them here, and I'm going to invite them to stand and join me to come back here. And the reason why I'm moving back here is because I used, the few Sundays that we've done this so far, when we stand up there, everybody comes out the back door. And while a few people still come forward, we're all sort of anxious to move on. So I decided, well, we're going to stand at the back. And you can come say hello to us, and especially to welcome Gene and Debbie here. Gene is a former... He's now a retired United Methodist minister out of the North Texas Conference, but he's still quite busy and working and doing some consulting stuff. And so we're glad to have that. And Debbie has been in advancement, I guess, work, nonprofit work, and is now in the transition, moving gratefully into the wide, mysterious world as we see what's available and what's next. So I hope you'll come and say hello to them. It's so good to have you. I'm going to invite you all to stand and take one another's hands, and I'll offer a blessing, and you don't have to look at me, just take someone's hand beside you. So, our task is ended, and a new one begins. Go in pieces. Where ideas have been unended and faith rear-ended, something new is being mended. Something new is being sown, and in all of the unraveling, we are traveling together into something larger of which we are all a part. Go in pieces to invite the intrusions, to diffuse the illusions, and to find a place of meeting again for the first time, to see and feel and to share your world anew. Amen.